All right, welcome back and back and back to the Bat of Doom track. We're going to try with Tony for the third time here. And Tony tells me that he's pretty good at breaking things. He just didn't know he was this good at breaking things.
That's great.
So Tony is a Tool member. He's going to talk very briefly about Tool, which is a pretty cool organization that I bump into at all the good conferences around the country. And Tony's talk is pretty interesting. I think you should stick around, and we're going to try and stick around too.
Great, thanks, Tim. So yeah, the talk's on key duplication and how it's not just for the movies. There's actually going to cover two different types of key duplication, two different methods. My name's Tony Virelli, like you said. You're going to see me as Byte Stealer in the Discord chat later, so hit me up if you see me. Specifically, if you want to reach me, the best way is probably Twitter, so @Virelli on Twitter. Like Tim said, I'm a member of Tool, which is the open organization of lockpickers. I'm based out of the Des Moines chapter, even though I'm not from Des Moines. It's just the closest chapter available to me. And I'm going to speed through the talk a little faster so I can try to keep the conference on time as well. So I would have told you to check out the Lockpicking Village. Unfortunately, since we went virtual, we're not able to do that. But make sure at your next con you go to that you look for a Lockpicking Village. It's a place you can sit down. There's locks all over the table. There's lockpicks available for you to use. If it's your first time or if you've picked lock before, come hang out, pick some locks. If you don't know how, grab a Tool member. They'll be wearing a Tool shirt just like this. They'll gladly come over, sit down with you, and kind of teach you the basics of picking a lock so you can pop open your first lock. So today we're going to cover two different methods of key duplication. One is 3D printing a key, and the other one is molding and casting that key. So we'll start with 3D printing a key. It's very easy. So what you're going to need is a 3D printer and some filament. If you don't know what filament is, it's just a strand of plastic, and it's what the medium that a 3D printer uses to build up the items that it prints. PLA, ABS, PETG, there's a whole just slew of different filaments you can use and materials. For everything I did, I used PLA, so it works fine. It's one of the cheapest materials there is. You're going to need either the key you want to duplicate. This can either be actual physical access to that key or just a photo of the key or knowing the depth cuts of that key. And there's an amazing site, which I'll go to here in a bit, called keygen.co that makes this even easier than you'll ever imagine. So like I said, you're going to need a 3D printer. I printed keys on both an Ultimaker 2 Plus and a Prusa i3 MK3S. It doesn't really matter. Any quasi-decent 3D printer will work perfect for this. You're going to need the key you want to duplicate. Like I said, for this one, we used a quickset lock, which is a very common household lock. The KW1 keyway is almost in every deadbolt in your home, probably. Either that or it's a Schlage. And then you're going to need a way to measure the key if you have physical access to it. So there is the measuring tool like this. All this does is lets you put the key, let's see here. Let's you take a key and just slide it in like this, and it stops and it tells you what number you're at. I don't need to zoom in. It's not that important. It's just an easy way to measure keys quickly. Otherwise, a pair of calipers works perfectly. So calipers give you more detail, but the key decoder is way faster. So decoding a key from a photo. So if I tell you to raise your hand if we were here, but pretty much you're probably seen the guys who walk around with the key fobs just dangling off their belt loops or their belts. Or you'll bend into an area where on the wall behind you, there's keys hanging on a wall at a security desk possibly. Or better yet, your best friend or one of your friends on Facebook just bought a new home and you get this picture. Just bought a new home and they're holding their house keys up to show you, or they're taking a photo of the house keys next to the closing documents on their counter. If you can get access to that photo, you can duplicate that key. It's very easy to do. I'm going to reference Deviant Olaf a lot in our videos. In my talk today, he does a lot of stuff on key duplication. He pretty much taught me everything I know through online videos, watching him do this and just expunge upon it. But he's got a ton of references online. So what you're looking at right now is his GitHub account. And he has these PNG files that literally give you, for different keys, this is a quick set example. It gives you the spacing on how far each cut needs to be on a key. And it also, on the right-hand side in the green area, gives you the depths of how far each key is. And that's in millimeters. But it's confusing because it's millimeters without the decimal. So when it says 836 for a 1 cut, that's 8.36 millimeters. 2 cuts, 777, that's 7.77 millimeters. And again, those are give or take. Those are on average. You might, instead of 777, you might see like a 767 or a 787 or anywhere in between that range. It's just you want to gauge it to the closest one. So how do you do this with a picture? So if I have an actual key, I can take a calipers and measure the cuts of each depth. So on a key cut here, you can see that there's little cuts on a key. Everyone knows what a key looks like. You just take the calipers and measure those depths. But if I have a photo, what I can do is take Deviant's other key depth set. And what this is this is specifically made for getting the depths of a key from a photo. So you can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And those are the different depths on a quick set. On different Schlage locks or different keys, there's going to be more numbers. But on a quick set, there's 1 through 7 for depths. And there's the black line across the bottom, which shows you where to set the bottom of the key. And then he just says quick set and gives you an idea of what the head of the key looks like, so you can reference it. So let's say I found a picture of a key on the internet, which I did. I literally just searched quick set key online, and I found a picture of a key. I took this into Photoshop. I took that key into Photoshop, and I did this. So looking at this key, I just overlaid the photo of a key over this. I resized it so it matched. So the top, it's hard for me to show here, but so the top up here matches with this line where the bottom of the key goes across this black line. And if you notice right here, if I follow across, I can see this blue line is very close here. So we have a 4 cut on this right here. Here is a 5 cut. This is a 5 cut. This is a 5 cut. And this is a 7 cut. So now I know what this is. So going from here, it's 7, 5, 5, 4, 5. So I can take this to one of the most amazing inventions I have ever seen before in my life. And that is keygen.co. I'll have links to this. There was an entire talk given at DEF CON one year about the guys who created this. It's completely open source up on GitHub, but they also host a website called keygen.co. To tell you what this is, you pretty much select your type of key. You select the outline for that key and the type of warding. So like if it's a 5-pin or a 6-pin or 7-pin, depending on which key it is, and then the type of warding you have. And then you enter your bidding cuts. So your bidding is what I just talked about, like the 7, 5, 5, 4, 5. And you just enter that in the bidding. So here's a quick video of me doing this live for the quick set key. It's not this bidding. It's a different bidding for a lock I actually own. So the outline is KW1, KW1. And for the bidding, I just literally type in this bidding, which is what we just figured out, and hit generate. And it's literally this easy. In a couple seconds, it generates an STL file for you. And an STL file is a standard 3D model that you can download and pretty much put into any slicer software for a 3D printer and print. So I'm going to go ahead and download this file. I'm just stepping it through here, showing a pre-recorded video of how this all works. So this is Print 3D view inside Windows. Shows you exactly what that key looks like. And I'm going to open it up inside Cura, which is one of the slicing softwares I use. I either use Cura or Slicer, Prusa Slicer, depending on which 3D printer I'm working with. So that shows the key in the Slicer software. And then what I do is I rotate it down so it's flat, so it prints quicker, and it's more stable that way as well. So just rotate it 90 degrees so it's flat on its bottom. I can hit slice, and there it is. Now, what you're seeing around the outside of that, it's called a brim. And that big lip around the outside just helps it adhere to the print bed. You don't need that. It was just my default setting when I did this. Normally, if I were to print that, I would not print that with the brim because it sticks good enough. Okay. So here's a quick time lapse of me 3D printing that key that I just downloaded. And the cool thing about this is the most important part of this entire print is the bidding. As long as those cuts line up with the real key, when you stick this into a lock, it's going to open. I think on average, I can print one of these keys in about 16 minutes is what it takes to print one key this size, which is awesome. I mean, if you think about from taking a photo into Photoshop and printing, you should be able to do all that. As long as you have something like Photoshop or GIMP, some photo editing software, you should be able to do all that within less than an hour. Depending on your skill level with already being familiar with 3D printing and skill level with a photo editing software. So this print should almost be done here. I'm just going to skip ahead. It's literally just the key printing. You get the idea. So here is a video of the key. This is a different key. I just cut the top off. I finished it early. I stopped the print early to test it. But this is a 3D printed key going into a quick set deadbolt, and it works. So it's literally that simple. And that is a key that was printed using the keygen.co website. All that black crud and stuff you see on it on the side of the white key, that's just literally grease from inside the lock. So that's what that is. Now, you have a 3D printed key. This is a great key, but it's not structurally sound. You're not going to be able to use this key over and over again without it breaking. So why don't you go down to your local hardware store where they have this fantastic, and by fantastic, I'm being sarcastic, this fantastic system that if you notice on the right-hand side, asks for your fingerprint if you want to store your keys. Don't even get me started on the security with KeyMe, but I'm just trying to show this. I'm sticking a 3D printed key into a key duplicator, and it's going to duplicate and spit out an actual working metal key for me. That's how crazy this is. It's like $4. Now, I walk up to, one of the hardware stores where they do key duplication with a human there. You hand the guy your key or the girl your key, and they go up to a duplicator. They're going to look at you really weird if you. So let me tell you, what's happening here is it misread the key and it thinks it's some weird key, which it's not. So it's wanting me to pick a less common key. So what I did is I canceled out and I restarted it. It just misread the key is all it was. Anyways, you take this to a standard guy and you hand him a plastic key and say, yeah, I need a copy of this. Yeah, probably not. He's going to question you. He's going to have like, what are you trying to do here? But one of these unmanned ones is absolutely perfect. So you stick the key in. I was trying to be careful. I didn't want to snap off plastic inside this machine. And you have to jam it through to get those gates to open. And then we're pretty sure, I'm not 100% sure how the KeyMe machine works, but with the rest of the people I've talked to in Tool, we're pretty sure it's optical. There was another machine there for a while that they used to have at this. This is my local Menards that had a minute key. And I don't think it was optical. I think it actually felt the key, like went along the key, but we believe this is optical. So I was trying to cancel the order to get it cheap because sometimes if you try to cancel your order, it would give you a discount. But you can see it's $1.99 to add a brass key to checkout. So it read my key, knew it was Schleg. I'm going to say, okay, proceed to checkout. And now it's the upsell. So it's going to say, hey, let me charge you and I'll give you an extra key for a little bit less money. So I'm just looking around the machine right now, realizing that it can do RFID and NFC, which is also scary. So imagine you're an employer and your employee wants to duplicate that key at this thing. And the fingerprint is so extra security. So there it is. It's trying to sell me an extra key for $1.50. No thanks. Anyways, what you can do is you can come back and enter your email address and put your fingerprint in, and you can reprint a key without having it anymore. So if you lose your key, you can always come back and reprint it. I want you to think about the security implications of that. Yeah, that's my new email address. That if someone configure your email and find a way to get with the fingerprint, there's a stored database somewhere online of people's key cuts and depths that can be replicated and printed at any machine, or just accessed and downloaded. If that was ever that database was ever leaked, that'd be a very, very serious physical security concern. So this is a little bit longer part of the video just because it does take a while to cut this video. So I'm going to jump ahead on the cut because it does take a while and we already lost some time. So the machine just cut out the key, spit out the key. It's a little bit of a rough cut, but that's just because this machine is a crappy machine. But that is the fully working Schleg key that was duplicated off a 3D printed key. So, okay, so now we're going to get into molding and casting a key. So this is where you feel like James Bond, and bonus, you get to play with fire, which is always great. So where I got the idea to do this part, Deviant Olaf again had a great video on YouTube where he went into this. And I've always known about key casting and molding, but I was always afraid to get into it just for the simple fact that I didn't know what to do because I didn't have access to a metal clamshell. So Deviant in his video showed that you absolutely do not need a metal clamshell. You can do this with a 3D printed clamshell. So pretty much what you're going to need is you're going to need physical access to the key that you want to duplicate. You will need physical access to that. You're going to need some point of low melting point metal. I use Fields metal because it's non-toxic. It's more expensive. A very common one is called Woods metal, but it contains lead and other toxic metals. It's up to you. If you want to be cheap and use the Woods metal, go for it. I do this at some cons and let kids try, so I don't need lead and other toxic vapors coming up into the air. You're going to need a cast iron skillet or some melting pot like this. I bought mine for $5 at Walmart. These mini ice cube trays are fantastic. Deviant told me about these. They make little cubes that are exactly the size you need to make a key. You're going to need some sculpting clay, some talcum powder, baby powder. I buy a little travel size one, just like this, because it fits into a bag. And then a clamshell, which you can download off Thingiverse for free and print yourself. And then you're going to need a melting ladle. And this is just a little ladle that allows you to melt the metal and pour it easily. And a lighter. I use a cigar lighter because it's a torch style lighter, but you can use a candle depending on your melting points. The torch lighters work best, and you can buy them for $15 or less on Amazon. So here's a quick video of me melting my original brick of Fields metal that I bought off Amazon, or excuse me, I bought off eBay. And you can see right now that the metal is slightly starting to melt. I make a mistake of moving around with a stick, which pretty much just destroys my pan when I go to pour it. Doesn't matter, this pan is only ever going to be used for melting these metals into little cubes. So it's completely melted down now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to pour it into the mini ice cube maker, and that will create all the little cubes I need for duplicating keys. So what I do there is I pour it in, I take each little cube out and I re-pour them, but it makes little cubes just like that, and I just store them in a container. So I get about 16 cubes from one little brick like that. So, okay, so now it's demo time. And normally I would do this demo live with you guys, but because of the scenario we have going on, I actually pre-recorded this demo last night, the whole video of it. So I'm gonna switch now to that. So give me 1 second here. I'm going to share that presentation, which is just the video, and get that going here. So here we go. Here's the demo of actually melting and casting the key.
Okay, so I'm going to get started with my demo here. I'm going to go over what I have here on the table. So some of the things you're going to need. The first thing is a clamshell. This is what we're going to use to actually mold the key. This is actually 3D printed. It's fully available for free download off thingiverse.com. And I'll try to make sure the links are available. They're definitely available in the slides, which I'll also make. So we have the main clamshell and the base. The base is pretty much so you don't have to hold this as you're pouring molten metal into it. It just lets you freehand it. Speaking of pouring molten metal, the next thing we have here is a ladle. And this is a lead ladle. You could use this for pouring lead, but it works perfectly for what we're doing. So we'll be pouring the metal into the clamshell like that. The next thing we're going to need is some sculpting clay. This is Sculpty. It's like a few bucks on Amazon for this package. This package is pre-split into 4 different bars, and you just need 1 bar is exactly perfect to fill this mold. You rip that 1 bar in half, and you fill each half of the mold. It works perfect. You're going to need some baby powder, some talcum powder. I buy this nice little jar or nice little bottle from Walmart. It's like $1 something, just because it's small and convenient. And I travel with all this stuff in this like pencil bag I found one time at Walmart during school shopping time. It's like $1 or $2 for this zipper bag, and it holds everything I need. You're going to need a lighter. I suggest a torch or a cigar lighter. This is a cigar lighter. You can't really see the flame on camera, I'm guessing, but that's what that is. And then I also have the metal. So there's different kinds of metals you can use for this. A very common, popular one is called woods metal. The problem with woods metal is that it contains lead, so it's toxic. The fumes it puts off are toxic. So I would highly suggest against it if you're going to be doing this around kids or in the public. For your own use, that's up to you. You decide if that's okay with you. This is Fields metal. Fields metal is non-toxic. I get mine off Amazon, and it's like $35 for a brick, and one brick makes pretty much enough to fill this little sleeve here. So about 16 little cubes, which you saw in the previous video that I made, melting it into a pan and then pouring it in this mini ice cube tray. So let's get into molding an actual key. So I have this lock. It's a quick set lock, and here's the key for that lock. Works perfect. So this is the key we're going to mold. So to get started, I'm going to move some stuff out of the way here. First thing I'm going to do is get my clamshell opened up and laid flat in front of me, and I'm going to open my clay. Now I try to open this nicely so that I can kind of wrap it back in the clay later. That's only because I'm doing it for demo purposes. This doesn't really matter. I've actually 3D printed a holder for this clay just because I like to be organized with my stuff, especially in 3D printing. So if you look at this again, you can see that there's, it's maybe hard to see, but you can see how there's these lines that pre-cuts into these bars. And this one bar is exactly the right shape. So if I take this bar and break it in half, or relatively in half, like so, this is exactly perfect for each side. So just take one and mash it up just like Play-Doh, soften it up just a little bit. And then what you're gonna do, and it's up to you. Some people like to take talcum powder and put this in so the clay comes out easier. For demo, I don't really care. If you needed to do multiple back-to-back, maybe that would make sense. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. Anyways, I get it into about a shape like that, and then I just push it down into the clamshell. And try to get it as flat as possible. So I'm pushing it down in, I'm back filling this big gap at the top, the big void at the top. And you want it to be as level with the top of this as possible. You don't want a big bulge of clay sticking up because it won't give you a good mold. It'll wrap around the key, which you do not want. So get this as flat as you can. Again, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. When you squish these two together, you're probably going to get some leak out. That's fine. Just get it as best as you can. So you can see I have that. It's pretty level. It's hard to see on camera, but it's pretty level. Now this part, you're going to want to depress this down in like so to create a well, because you need some place to pour the molten up metal into. So I'm creating like this lip that I can bend backwards, and it's just this well, because the top of the key doesn't need to be molded. That's not important. So pretty much you do this again and just repeat it on the other side. So I'm going to take the clay and again soften it up by squishing it. And you want to make sure that you go above the border here. You want that lump, and then you want to press it down to flatten it out. Otherwise, if you try to like skim it in, you might get an air pocket below, and when you squish the key in, all the clay moves down and you won't get a good impression. Okay, so I've pushed it all down in, and I still have a bulge. So now I'm going to work on getting that bulge down so it's not above the plane of the top of the clamshell. And again, I'm going to fill this void in on the top. People have asked me if the color of clay matters. It doesn't. Literally, if you go on Amazon, one day one color is cheaper than the other color. So sometimes you'll see this in yellow, sometimes you'll see it in green, black, red, blue. It doesn't matter. It is literally just whatever's the cheapest I buy, because why pay $8 or $5 for red when green is $1.99? So, okay, so I have that pretty well in there. I'm going to check to make sure I don't have it too low. And I think I'm good. And now I'm just going to, again, create that well on the top with my thumb, squishing it back. So I create a lip. And when I put these two together, it'll create a pour spout, kind of like this, that the metal can go down in. So now the next important part is to cover these two pieces, or these two sides, in talcum powder, so that when you push the two clays together and you separate them, that they separate and they don't just stick into one big glob of clay. So you just take a little talcum powder and sprinkle it on both sides here. And then just take your finger and rub that talcum powder across the top of all the clay. Just like that. Double check this. This seems a little bulgy. Now that I've pressed it down, I'm going to put a little more powder on. Okay. So we have these both sides coated. They're good to go. So I'm done with the talcum powder. I'm done with the clay. So the next thing we're going to need here is we're going to need the key. Now it's important that when you press this down that you think about this key as having two halves. Have one, have two over here. You don't want to shove the whole key down 100% into one side. You want to push it down about halfway on one side so that when you put the other clamshell on top, half the keys on one clamshell and half the keys on the other side of the clamshell. So to start with, I'm just going to place this in here so that the bow of the key, which is right here, is make sure that that's in thick clay, not in the well. So I want it down far enough that we're good there. Okay. And then I'm going to press down and rock it back and forth, just trying to get it down about halfway in. And just lean in and check on it. Make sure you're about halfway in, all the way around. So now you can see the key stuck in halfway there. Now the next thing to do is take this clamshell, place it on top, and then squeeze these two pieces together. Now, it's suggested that you stand on this, which I'm not going to do because you're not going to see it anyways. So I'm just going to place my hands down on the table and press. You want to get a nice firm pressure on this, and just stand on it and put some weight on it a second. Give it a second for the clay to move out of the way for the key to come in. Because remember, you have the warding and all the parts of the key that you need to get up in. Okay, that should be good. Now, you want to carefully open this, separate them apart. Don't rock it back and forth because you're going to mess up the clay. Just try to get it apart as cleanly as possible, like so. And we have a pretty decent impression over here. It looks like the key sunk in a lot on this side, so I'm hoping this all turns out well. But you saw how the clay came apart without sticking. That's because we used the talcum powder. So I'm going to bend this lip back, and I'm going to use the true method of flicking the key out. The reason we do this is we want to get it out as fast as possible, because if you lift it up, it can cause the tip of the key to dig into it, so we want to get it out as fast as possible. So there, it's out. It shot across the room, but that's fine. So where do we go from here? So the next step to do is we're going to go ahead and take these two pieces of clamshell, we're going to put them back together. And now we have a void. Now I'm going to open up these lips on the top to make sure that I can see down into where we're about to pour, which I can see fine. So I'm going to place that into this holder. And this does two things. One, it keeps these two pieces tight together. And two, it makes it so I don't have to hold this in my hands as I pour molten metal over it. And if I bump it or miss, I'm not going to end up with melted metal all over my hands. So the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to take out 1 cube of my Fields metal. And again, this metal is meant to melt at very low melting points. So a candle or a lighter works fine. And 1 cube is almost absolutely perfect for your average key. So like a standard Schlage key or quickset key. So I'm going to drop this in the end of the ladle, like so. And I'm going to try to do my best here to let you see this melt and how fast it goes, but it's going to be kind of hard to do. So we'll do our best here. So I can already see it moving, so it's already starting to melt. And as soon as the metal below it starts melting, and you get a little bit of liquid metal, that metal heats up the rest of the cube and it melts really quickly. So there it goes. So now I got to kind of look at it here to verify. So it just hit completely liquid. I'm going to go a little bit longer to make sure it doesn't start solidifying on me quite yet. There we go. We're good to go. And now we just pour this metal down in. And I'm kind of doing this because I want it to get down in. I don't want any air bubbles to get out. But that should be good. And now we just let it sit. Now, depending on how long you heat this for, let me bring this in. This is silicone, so I can put something hot on it and it won't melt. Depending on how long you heat the metal for, it's going to take longer to cool. Now, this takes quite a bit longer to cool because it's such a low melting point. If you use woods metal, the toxic stuff, it doesn't take as long to do. If you watch any of Deviant's videos, you'll see that he uses, his clamshell is actually, I think it's milled out of aluminum, which if you think about what aluminum is, it's a heat sink. So that would help awesome to cool the key faster, where this is plastic. This isn't going to act as a heat sink. So if you can get a metal clamshell, great. Again, it's not needed. This is super simple to make. It's probably like a few dollars worth of plastic in this. So it works really well. You don't have to have metal. If you've ever seen it, when I first started, that's what I thought. I thought, oh, I didn't have a metal clamshell. How am I supposed to try this? And when I saw the 3D printed one, it was fantastic. So I'm watching the top, I'm kind of shaking it, and I can see that the center is starting to solidify, but the sides are still jiggly, and I wish I could tip this to show you, but if I do, that metal might run out. So it doesn't have to be cooled down to take it out, but it does need to be solidified. So we're going to finish letting this go here. I'm just tapping it, and pretty much what I'm looking for is if the metal's still kind of jello-y on top, or you can see liquid still. And as soon as I don't see that anymore, then I'm pretty sure we're good to go. So there's just a few little spots that are still like that down in here. We're very close now. Some very, very small spots still jiggling, which means they're cooling off. And if you open this too early and it's not solidified down, you're going to have molten metal just running out. So better to be safe than sorry. Okay, it looks pretty solidified. I'm going to give it a couple, like one more minute here just to cool off a little bit to guarantee it's good all the way down. And when we pull this out, you may or may not see some gaps, some air gaps. That's fine. The key can still work. The important part obviously is the bitting of the key and the warding. But if there's holes in the warding, we're fine. If there's holes in the bitting, then we have problems because there might make a dip where it won't lift the pins to the proper height. Okay, I think we're good. So I'm going to go ahead and take the base off this. Okay, and then we're going to split this open. And it looks like we have a good casting. So let's see, well, I've got to keep it in the light so you can see it here. So there's the key. And you can see we don't have the entire top of the head. We have just enough though that we can grab onto it and turn it. And we can see all the key in here. We can see the warding. So let's go ahead and peel this out. So we got a little clay on the tip. That's not a big deal. Just pull it off. So you can see there's a lot of flashing around here and stuff like that. But again, none of this matters. And if that bothers you, it's so thin and soft. Just bend it back. Okay. Now we have a little bit of flashing, it looks like, around this bitting area. But again, I'm not overly concerned with that because of the way the cut is. I can just kind of bend that flashing out of the way. So I think we're completely good to go here. So now it's the moment of truth because, you know, demos fail. What's new? So let's place it into the lock. It goes into the lock. That's good news. Now we'll open the lock. There it goes. So there was that little bit of flashing. So when I first started turning it, it caught. But as soon as I turned, that flashing bent out of the way and we're good to go. So now we have a fully working duplicate of that key. So like when we talked about with 3D printing of this key is very bendable. It's very soft. But I can take a pair of calipers, or again, I can take the key depth measurement guide here. See, quick set. Where'd you go? There. And I can take this now. I can get the measurements from this on my own time because I have a duplicate of this key now. Take my own time to get my measurements. I could 3D print this key and take this to a KeyMe or a key duplication, unmanned key duplication machine and have a permanent copy of this key forever. If you only need to get it once or twice, this will work. Again, this will last for a while. So I'm making a mess, but like that, it'll work perfectly. However, I want to show that this key is soft, so I'm going to bend it here just to show you. That doesn't take a lot of power to bend that. You can see that's a completely bent key now. But if I lay it on a table and I flatten it back out, we should be good to go. Let me just test it. Yep, we still get an open. So that is duplicating key with casting a key and melting metal in casting it in clay. So let me flip back to my other screen here and we'll continue on.
Okay, so that is, excuse me, that's all I have for the demo. There's some credits in here, so we'll make these slides available so you can get links to all the credits available for everyone I talked about, which is Deviant, the guys who came up with the keygen.co, and Deviant's original key casting video. And that's it. That's all I have. So I will open it up for questions.
Cool. That's awesome, Tony. It's pretty neat to see it. It's kind of funny when you're bending the key. Do you ever feel like you're a giant or like Superman or something?
I'm always afraid that when I try to bend it back, it won't.
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
There are a couple of questions. Some are a little early, and I think you might have addressed it or partially addressed it, but sure. I'm gonna ask you anyway. Early on, somebody was asking what your slicer settings are when you're printing a key.
Sure. So I'm doing 0.1 layer heights at 100% infill, no supports, and I think that should be enough for them to know. The temperature is pretty much based on what you need, but I do a 0.10 micro or layer height with 100% infill just for strength. It doesn't necessarily have to be. It depends if you're trying to open the lock or just make a duplicate of it somewhere. But if you're trying to open a lock, you're going to want the 100% infill.
Sure. I think you also addressed this partially, but it still might be interesting because you probably thought about it a little bit. And somebody was asking if there's a way to strengthen the key after it's printed. Like, I know that you're kind of like the whole point of the talk is like getting to a stronger key, but specifically sort of at that juncture, have you considered like freezing it prior to going to the duplicator or spraying it with some sort of, hardening agent?
Sure.
Both to make it stronger for the duplicator and then also to maybe prevent any like evidence, so to speak, being left in the duplicator?
Sure. So I'm not sure freezing would work. I would actually be concerned that freezing PLA plastic would actually make it more brittle. And then as far as spraying it with a coating, you could maybe get away with that. I wouldn't spray it. I would feel like you would have to brush it on. Because you have to realize we're talking very small amounts of depth difference for keys. So by adding any form of hardener on top of your printed key, it could adjust that cut depth so it won't open the lock anymore. If you can't make a duplicate, what I would suggest and what I highly suggest is that when you're done with your key, you can you can slice off the bottom of this part right here. This isn't really needed, right? All that matters are these top cuts. Slice off this bottom part, and you can actually take like a lockpicking tension wrench or a small screwdriver and stick it in below the key into the keyway. And all of this does is lifts the pins inside the lock, and you actually use a turning tool to actually do the turning. Because the only thing you have to worry about strength-wise is the rotational force you're putting on a key. So if you stick something else in to do the actual turning and don't rely on the printed key, you're good there. But as far as hardening the actual key, I've printed in carbon fiber infused materials. It doesn't really matter. It's to the point where the standard PLA works just as well. I actually find some of those metal infused plastics to actually be more brittle sometimes. So if you used a stronger plastic like PETG or ABS, I'm guessing that'll last longer as well. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, cool. There's some other questions about this is a bit more of a one-on-one, but is there a quick way that you can tell some novice folks on how to look at the key and decide like how many pins there are in that lock?
Yep, pretty simple. You just cut the cuts or count the cuts. So if you start back here, let's see if I can get this close enough you can see it. Yep. You can see that there is, let me just use a sharp object because why not? That'll not hurt. You can see right there that there's a cut right here. There's a little dip. So there's a 1. There's another tiny dip here. There's 2. Another tiny dip, 3. Another dip, 4. And another dip, 5. So that's how you would count the cuts on a key to know how many pins it is you can just see the cuts on your actual physical key. that's how you would figure that out.
Cool. There was a decent amount of chat. Somebody else is actually answering some questions in there too. So we got some community going on in the chat channel. But yeah, if anybody else wants to approach Tony, I think you're Bite Stealer on Discord. So look for Bite Stealer with the blue tag. And it's really fun talk, Tony. I think it's pretty cool that you're able to sort of do that, and you can do it in sort of the confined time space of a conference talk. It's really neat. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for joining us for KernelCon Virtual, and hope to see you again.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks.